Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I want to talk about RT. I've thought about doing this video for a while, and I'm only just now getting around to it. Lefties have taken a liking to RT, and it's easy to like, particularly for lefties. RT tends to take a disposition that's anti-imperialist and tends to focus on issues from a left-wing perspective. Now, it may say that it doesn't do that, but that's exactly what it does. Now, when I say left-wing perspective, I don't mean Democrat. I don't mean faux left. I mean a left-leaning perspective. Now, lefties look at this, and it can feel like there's no bias to RT, but there is a bias to RT. There's a clear bias to RT. I've always made this point that everything has a bias. United States media tends to push a United States objective, regardless of its annoyances from time to time. Ultimately, if you're talking about issues of war, if you're talking about issues of economics, it takes a particular point of view. One that doesn't necessarily listen to the overwhelming masses of people who are struggling in this country. Nor does it care about the people who we murder abroad. When they did that report, I think it was CBS, it was one of the mainstream networks, but doing a report on Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and in no way getting across that the United States has a major influence on what's taking place, meaning those Yemenis that are being starved and those Yemenis are being murdered is done with the help of the United States. The media conveniently doesn't mention that. It doesn't mention that. They can call Trump every name in the book, but the moment that Trump bombs somebody, Trump is presidential. It is an amazing thing to watch. It is essentially state media. When state comes out and says something, meaning the FBI, CIA, NSA, even though these organizations have a history of flagrantly lying to the population, the media will repeat what they're saying almost verbatim, as if what they're saying is the word of God. It's this amazing thing to watch. Now, I say that to say that RT gives a different perspective. Part of the reason that they hate RT so much is because RT doesn't toe that particular line and that particular agenda. That is not the allegiance of RT. RT, even though it gives stories from this kind of lefty position, it is a political entity. Democrats, government, in this case, doesn't like RT because RT gives us an alternate perspective. But understand that they also understand that RT is a political entity. It is a political tool. It is a political body of sorts. Yes, it's true that the news and the information that they give you is awesome to lefties and progressives. But part of that reason is because lefties and progressives don't like this idea of imperialism. We don't like going into one country after the next, bombing and murdering people. We don't like spending $1 trillion on a war budget. We hate those things. We tend to look at this world from somewhat of a humanistic perspective. So a network, given a position that doesn't have our soldiers, the courage of our soldiers, being leveraged to murder, hurt, and subjugate other people around the world, for us, that is an awesome fucking thing. Now, that being said, that's also an awesome fucking thing for Russia. Meaning, of course, Russia does not want the United States insinuating itself in areas around the globe, particularly creating this kind of chaos in areas and regions around Russia. All countries want to have a certain amount of dominance over their particular domain. Russia is no different. NATO and U.S. forces have essentially encircled Russia. Despite the promises that the United States made to Russia, the United States ignored and lied about all those promises and advantaged itself greatly off the misery of Russia at the point where it changed over during the Gorbachev administration. If Russia has the potential to support an organization in the United States that suits its political interests, and I'm not talking about the stupid shit of, creating havoc with BLM and all that, none of that stuff. I'm talking about just putting out a point of view that part of this country has and part of this country espouses, and supporting elements in the country that are anti-war and anti-militaristic, then yeah, it suits Russia in the same way that it suits the lefties to not have the United States bombing and murdering and killing abroad. It makes sense that RT would support these particular point of views because those point of views do coincide or help Russia. It's just true. Like, and this is not this kind of Russian propaganda thing, or Russia Red Menace thing, or anything else. I've said before, you can have multiple things, meaning multiple items, in dealing with a particular issue, and multiple items be true, meaning multiple perspectives being true. It is ridiculous that Russia had anything to do with Hillary Clinton losing the election. Hillary Clinton lost on her own merits. It is true that Hillary Clinton screamed Russia and Trump and Comey and every other thing that she could do to try to obfuscate from her failures in losing that election. It is also true that the Democratic Party has let down massive segments of the population being obsequious to cash, and in no way could create a clear delineation between who they are and who the Republicans are, despite the Republicans being the most rabid bunch of batshit crazies that we've ever seen in this political system. That being said, again, it is true that Russia has a vested interest in the United States murdering and killing abroad. It is also true that it makes perfect sense that if a network is espousing a point of view that says, hey, maybe you guys shouldn't murder and kill abroad, if you have a section of the country that has that particular point of view, then yeah, you as a foreign power who has an ability to put forth a point of view yourself will support and back up that point of view in the same way the United States supports and backs certain point of views that are advantageous to the United States. Are we really going to say that putting out a point of view in a country that says it has free speech, and that point of view is not talking about hurting or killing anybody or anything else, this point of view is purely this anti-militaristic point of view? Are we really going to say that an anti-militaristic point of view is problematic in this country? I'm trying to give a little bit more context to this. Saying that RT is some kind of Russian agent that's trying to topple and undermine the United States government is foolish and ridiculous. Saying RT is innocuous is just as foolish and ridiculous. Of course Russia has a point of view. Every country, every media outlet, every person who's espousing anything has a particular point of view. The question becomes, what is that point of view? Is that point of view advantageous to you? Is that point advantageous to the person who's spouting it? And is it possible that it's advantageous to both? Meaning it's a win-win. Now, I bring this up and I make this point in this way. I love the stories that RT puts out. That being said, I am acutely aware that they do have a perspective and they do have a point of view in the way that they operate. There are certain stories that RT does that are over the top. Over the top, where the interviewer is aggressively putting forth the Russian point of view. But many others, the points of view that are there, are just the point of view of the person who's actually giving it. Meaning, if Lee Camp is doing a story, if Ed, I can't think of his name. I can't think of his last name. His last name vanished from me. The guy that used to be on MSNBC. He's like a bear. He's awesome. Ed Schultz. These guys are just espousing their particular point of view, and their particular point of view is going to be somewhat to the left. It's going to be anti-war, and if you ask me, do I agree with it? Yes. Yes. RT should be left to its devices in the same way that the other media networks can operate in the United States. That's what it boils down to. This red baiting, this Russian propaganda, this somewhat xenophobic scapegoating of Russia for the failures and the problems that are in the country itself, whether you want to talk about racism, whether you want to talk about class antagonisms. These are not things that are created by Russia. These are things that are homegrown, made, and propagated in the United States, in the political system of the United States, and in the economic system of the United States. It has nothing to do with RT. It has everything to do with us. So, RT is not innocuous. But for the time being, when RT is giving a perspective that, for the most part, falls in line with lefties, then RT will have my support. If RT falls off the rails and start doing just essentially just blunt Russian propaganda that supports an interest that is not necessarily humanistic, then yeah, at that point, I will be against RT. It's understanding the perspective of the outlets that you're watching and that you're reading from. It's vitally important. Meaning, accept that there is no unbiased perspective. Accept that many of the things that we interact with are just perspectives. And those perspectives are somewhat, in some cases, relative. Sometimes you get to the far edges of those perspectives. But all things being equal, usually those things are relative to one another, providing they're not lying about the reality that we exist in. What I mean is, insofar as those perspectives can be compared to the actual real world, then you can say, okay, that person is lying, that person is fibbing, and that person is way in the fucking weeds. But if we're talking about political ideologies, then those things become somewhat perspectives. And at that point, it becomes, what is the perspective of the person, of the shiny individual who's talking to me? Once I understand the perspective, it gives me a little bit more context in regards to what the person is saying. Many of the shows and much of the news that RT puts out is slanted in a particular direction, but all news is slanted in a particular direction. And in the same way that sometimes you go to a Republican to get information on a Democrat because those two things are antagonistic towards one another. And in the same way, you may go to a Democratic outlet to get information against a Republican. Mind you, they're not going to tell you the faults of themselves. So bake that into the cake. But you don't have an expectation of them to tell you their own faults. Your expectation is to talk about the things that you yourself is interested in, particularly when it's positioned against somebody else. The interesting part here, though, is being anti-war. Being anti-war just so happens to be against U.S. policy. Think about that. Both parties, for the most part, have the same policy on issues of war. George Bush tortures and murders. Obama said, we don't like the torturing some folks, but no, we're not going to do anything about it. And yeah, we ourselves are going to stop torturing, but we are going to push that torture into other countries, meaning we will grab somebody, we will send that body to some other country for them to be tortured and to get information out of the person who's being tortured in the other country. But the United States will cleanly say, we don't torture. Donald Trump gets in office. Obama kills thousands and thousands of people with flying killer robots. Some of the reports show 90% of those people were innocent, meaning for the most part, you're just killing and murdering civilians. Donald Trump comes in office and ups that number, putting the program back into the CIA so the public can't see how many civilians that are being murdered. Now, the United States media is not going to tell me that Donald Trump and Obama are murdering civilians abroad. RT will. RT will. So, that being said, RT is not going to tell me that Putin is spying on all of the people in Russia either. But is that my expectation to see that from RT? No. I understand the bias. Understanding the bias was important. RT should be left to its own devices. RT is playing a vital role in the United States media. But at the same token, understand that there are times that RT will say stuff that may go a little bit off the rails. But the people who are there, who are on that network, that are Americans, those people aren't Russian agents. Those people are just human being Americans that literally had to go to Russia in order to get free speech. Fucking amazing. In order to get a lefty perspective, a sane perspective in regards to somebody saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be killing people around the globe. They had to go to Russia. So, both parties don't like this because both parties are fundamentally pro-war. Leave RT to its devices. RT is playing a major role in regards to the left. Sad that you had to get RT's help in this because you couldn't get the regular mainstream media to attend to these conversations and these issues. War, economics, those type of things. The things that media, for the most part, fundamentally ignores in the United States because they're bought and paid for by certain interests. RT doesn't have those interests. RT has other interests. So yeah. Personally, I think RT is fucking awesome. And they can blacklist them and blackball them all they want. At the end of the day, the reason why they blackball RT and the reason why they try to associate any and everything that they can find with RT to try to discredit the organization is because ultimately what they're saying fundamentally challenges the narrative of the world that they put out on mainstream media. And they hate that. They hate it. They hate it. When you bring up something going on with United States imperialism, when you bring up something going on with just income inequality in the United States, the exploitation of the workers in the United States, when you show the wealth gap, when you show all of these things that really don't come up on mainstream news, just ridiculousness comes up on mainstream news. It's somewhat sad commentary that it took Russia. It took Russia to allow a conversation to take place that was somewhat distinct from the consensus of reality on the mainstream networks, CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. RT is important. That being said, don't forget that RT does have its own biases. So I will leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks.